Welcome to another special edition of the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. Special roster deadline day. The Giants have announced their initial 53-man roster. We'll cover it all for you right here in the Hackensack Meridian Health podcast studio. Keep getting better. To do it, joining me is Paul Dottino. I am, of course, John Schmeelk. And Paul, we have the initial 53-man roster. The odds this is the same 53 men that'll be on this roster when the Giants suit up in week one is probably not super high, to be totally honest with you. That's just the way the NFL works. But we know what the initial 53 is: 26 offensive players, 24 defensive players, and 3 specialists.
Yeah, and of course, there's a new rule that was put in place last year that allows you to put 2 guys on injured reserve designated to return before the 53. So, little plug for the Big Blue Kickoff live show. When I was on with Matt Sitek earlier today, we talked about the fact that it's almost a pseudo 55-man roster instead of 53, because you do have the ability to protect those extra 2 guys.
And those guys have to be on injured reserve for a minimum of 4 games.
Correct.
To come back. So the Giants did utilize that. Josh Ezeudu was the player that they decided to designate for return on injured reserve. He missed that final preseason game. Never really disclosed what that injury was.
No.
But he'll miss the first 4 games of the season. And I guess we could start there, Paul, just because that was the first piece of news we brought up. The Giants keeping 10 offensive linemen. Ezeudu would be number 11. But again, he is not on that initial 53 because he got placed on injured reserve with the ability to return after 4 games. So the offensive linemen that made it, you have your starting 5. You have Andrew Thomas. You have Greg Van Roten. You have John Runyon. You have John Michael Schmitz, and you have Jermaine Illuminor. So those are your starting 5, assuming Andrew Thomas is healthy in week 1. Then you have James Hudson, Marcus Bowe as your nominal backup tackles. You have Austin Schlottman as your nominal backup center. And then your 2 guards are Evan Neal and Aaron Stinney. These are the guys that we had on there when we did our predictions. Neither one of us had Schlottman on there. That was a surprise, but I understand the desire to have a straight-up backup center on your roster. So if something happens to John Michael Schmitz, knocking on wood, you don't have to move Van Roten over, bring in another guard, then you're changing 2 spots to fix 1.
You know, usually, John, well, I should say very often, teams will go with 9 offensive linemen. And that's why when we look at the 10 number, we're like, wow, you know, that's a little bit high.
And 11 with Ezeudu, if you count him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but I do understand. You're right. To me, I probably would have understood if they decided that Van Roten would be the backup center and that if anything did happen to JMS, they would have a guy who I believe could do the job at a competent level.
Which, by the way, that still might be what they do if that injury happens.
You never know. But Schlottman winds up staying because that is his usual occupation. He is a center by trade. Clearly, they felt more comfortable with that. Now, I wonder if part of that equation, okay, is that they figure, well, you know what? If JMS were to go down, isn't it easier to just plug in 1 spot instead of have to upsetting 2 spots?
Yep. All right, let's stay on offense. Let's go to the quarterback position, Paul. They keep Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, and Jackson Dart. Not really a surprise there. It's always very difficult to keep 4 quarterbacks. Even the Browns, who were theorized they could be a team that could do that, they ended up trading Kenny Pickett. They only kept 3. Giants keep 3 as well. Who knows what's going to happen if the Giants want to or able to get Tommy DeVito back on the practice squad, but we'll see if he clears waivers.
Right, because, again, anytime you sign someone to the practice squad, they got to be willing to sign their signature to the paper. And we don't know what kind of future Tommy DeVito is thinking for himself. Maybe he decides that, he wants a fresh start, too. You just don't know the answer to that.
Absolutely not, and we'll see how and again, this is not a depth chart, folks. I'm just listing players in random orders here, so let's just keep that in mind as well. And, again, usually around 30 to 35 players get claimed on waivers each year, so we'll see if the Giants claim anyone themselves or if any of the Giants players that they let go get claimed by another team. And those players, by the way, within that early years of service time, if they get claimed, they have to go to another team.
Right, it's under 4 years.
Right. So if you're on your rookie contract, pretty much.
Correct.
You're going to have to go to the team that claims you. If you're past 4 years, you can choose to sign wherever you want as a straight free agent after you're let go, just so fans understand what the process is there. All right, running back position, Paul. This is where both of us were a little bit wrong when we did our predictions on Monday. I'm annoyed that I let you convince me, because we were having this debate about this for weeks, and I finally let you convince me.
Well, wait a minute now. Tiki Barber felt the same way.
I know.
He said on our post-game show.
Both of you managed to convince
Yes,
me.
we
I should
did.
have stuck to my initial guns and my gut feeling that the Giants would not keep 4 running backs, and they did not. They decided to let go of Turbo Miller, but they do hold on to Devin Singletary, Tyrone Tracy, and Cam Scatterbo. Look, I think these are 3 running backs that the Giants would have confidence in putting on the field in any situation at this point. But I do think not keeping the 4th shows they do have a level of confidence in Cam Scatterbo being healthy, Paul,
Right.
as someone that missed a lot of camp with a leg injury, only played in 1 preseason game for 2 series. But the fact that they're not keeping a 4th tells me they feel pretty good about his health heading into the regular season.
Well, I think the real linchpin to that whole thing about Scatterbo is that he did get some carries in this past week's game against the Patriots. Had that not happened, it would have been logical for them to have some doubts. But the fact that he was able to get those carries, and obviously he must have come out of it healthy. Otherwise, they might have had trepidation.
Now, this is where you get the extra offensive player that I think we're all a little surprised by. So the Giants keep 6 wide receivers, 1 more than I would consider the standard, which is 5 generally around the league.
5, yeah.
And they keep 4 tight ends, which is 1 more than the standard 3.
Also.
Let's go tight end first. Daniel Bellinger, Thomas Fidone, Theo Johnson, Chris Manhertz. The 3 guys that we expected to be on, the veterans that have been here for a while. They're on. Theo Johnson, veteran, second-year player, I know, but he's a young veteran. He's been on the team.
Sure.
And then Thomas Fidone II, obviously they did not want to potentially lose him as a waiver claim, as a guy that my guess is that on a lot of game days probably will not get a jersey as the 4th tight end. But he's someone with a lot of talent, a lot of upside that they hope now they can develop without a lot of pressure to play right away with those 3 veterans ahead of him.
Well, I think anybody who was at training camp or even the offseason program would agree that he showed much better off than a 7th-round draft choice could possibly be expected to show. He definitely had some really, really sharp flashes. Then in the preseason games, I forget exactly how many targets he had, John, but I know this. He didn't have any drops. I mean, virtually everything that was thrown at him, he made a play.
Good hands.
He made a play.
And he showed off his length a lot of the times. Did we talk
Without a
about that
doubt.
when he got drafted, 34-inch arms? How many times did he go up and get balls that were off target?
Look, I appreciate the fact that early on, you had liked him even going into the draft process. Had injuries early in his career at Nebraska, but a guy who clearly does have a really nice toolbox. He did show that when he was here. I think the thing for me that made it very interesting is that when you're looking at the number of tight ends you're going to keep, now you got to shave something off another position, and that can be really difficult to do.
Huddle up, get in here. If you're lined up here, you gotta go over the middle with it to score.
Right. How do we make that happen?
I don't know, but Citizens does.
Make sense of your money with Citizens, official bank of Eli Manning.
Well, especially when you also keep 6 wide receivers.
I know.
Which was a little bit surprising. So the non-surprises, obviously Malik Neighbors, he made it. Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt. Gunnar Olszewski won the kick returner battle. We'll talk about that. But first, let's talk about the 6th wide receiver that made it onto the roster, Paul. And that's Bo Collins, who I know the coaching staff was a big fan of. He had a very productive spring. He missed some time in the summer with an injury, but when he was on the field, he was also productive. He caught that nice deep pass in the preseason from Russell Wilson on the deep post. Mm-hmm. He's tall. He's long. He's got a little bit of speed. He's not like a 4.3 guy, but I think he was a high 4.4 guy when he got timed out in the 40-yard dash. So he can run a little bit. And the Giants, for them to keep him, Paul, they must like him enough where they're like, we cannot risk losing him if we decide not to put him onto the 53. So I think it shows their appreciation for the player and what they think he can develop into, who I now think is in a similar position to Fidone, where you're not going to rely on him right away. There's a good chance early in the year he's probably not going to get a jersey on game days either, depending on the health of the rest of the position. Though he did play some special teams in the preseason, but he wasn't in there a ton. He wasn't a core guy.
He did enough to show his willingness to do so, which is a big deal.
Correct. But again, I think they got in a guy at the back end of one of these rooms that they see as a developmental player that they think if they keep working with can become something down the road.
Well, I think any time that an offensive coordinator can get his hands on a big-bodied, long receiver that has really good hands, he's going to smile. And so I do understand the attraction. And coming out of Notre Dame, big-time program, and I get this little Tom Coughlin voice in the back of my head every time I think about wide receivers who are not afraid to get physical. Tom used to say all the time, and this is going back when he was receivers coach under Bill Parcells, he would say, my receivers, you better be able to block. And if you don't block, I'm telling the head coach not to put you in.
Yeah.
Well, Bo Collins is not afraid to block.
Remember, Notre Dame, he was also with Clemson before then, another
Correct.
big-time program where he was a starting wide receiver. Never really got with a really top quarterback in his time in
No,
college,
not
which is
really.
why his numbers were a little depressed.
Yeah.
And two teams that like to run the ball in Clemson and Notre Dame as well, just in terms of how they play.
Mm-hmm.
So, something to keep in mind. The other interesting, as I mentioned, at the wide receiver position, we had this debate, who the Giants would keep as their kick returner. And we talked about Brian Daboll's, the importance of having a player that was going to protect the football and not make mistakes catching it or fumbling, a guy that'll maintain possession for you.
Mm-hmm.
And we figured, look, if that's the case, the two guys we would talk about is Amir Smith-Marset and Gunnar Olszewski.
Well, they check both boxes.
Two veterans that have done it before and have shown they can be relied on. Gunnar Olszewski, even though he was a late add in the summer, after training camp had already started, they decided to go with him over Amir Smith-Marset.
You know, John, two different body types. Smith-Marset, if he's going to play receiver, is going to be a boundary. If Olszewski's going to be a receiver at all, if they use him in that fashion.
Which, by the way, he was pretty effective over the summer as a receiver.
He was. And that's the point that I'm really going to make here, is that Olszewski was really good during training camp, caught everything. I don't remember him allowing a ball to hit the ground on a drop once.
He dropped a couple diving catches, but that's it.
Yeah, but I'm talking about drops where I would credit him with a drop.
Correct.
Okay, there were a couple plays he didn't make, but no drops. And he has the versatility of being able to play slot because he's more diminutive.
Yep.
He's your typical slot body type, which allows him to then have more versatility as a pure receiver than Smith-Marset, who in my mind is strictly a boundary receiver. I don't know how much that weighed into the deal here, because what we know is that Olszewski was more of a punt returner and Smith-Marset was more of a kickoff returner.
Now, Olszewski does have over 40 career kick returns. He just hasn't done it here yet.
Correct. So, I don't know how they really dissected this. I don't think the Giants could have lost with either guy, to be honest.
So they go with Gunnar Olszewski. Giants Huddle Podcast is brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. From game day celebrations to your everyday financial needs, Big Blue fans can get the most out of every moment with Citizens. Learn more at citizensbank.com/Giants. Three specialists, not surprisingly, Graham Gano, Casey Kreider, Jamie Gillen.
Right.
So that gets you to 29 players.
And I think it's worth mentioning here that Graham Gano, who had some injuries in each of the previous two seasons, came into camp in great shape, kicked extremely well.
And nailed 350 yarders in the first preseason game.
They were so happy.
And then they're like, all right, you don't need to kick anymore. You're good.
Exactly. He proved that right now, Father Time is still in his rearview mirror, and that's why he's still on this team.
Absolutely. So that means 24 defensive players. Let's start with the defensive line. And I'm going to include Chauncey Golston in this group.
Yes.
As somebody that will play the edge and will also play on the defensive line depending on what down it is. So it's Golston, obviously Dexter Lawrence, Roy Robertson Harris, Raheem Nunez-Roches, the rookie Darius Alexander. And then they decide to keep DJ Davidson over Elijah Chapman, over Jordan Riley, over Elijah Garcia. It was a good group of guys. They end up keeping Davidson. Paul, he's the bigger body of that group, except for maybe Jordan Riley. I think he might be a little bit bigger than Davidson.
Yeah, a little more
but
boxy.
Davidson certainly has been, I think, more consistent in his time on the field than Riley has. He's battled some injuries over the course of his career. But if you really want to get a true backup nose tackle that's a plugger behind Dexter Lawrence, that ultimately, my guess, is why they went with DJ Davidson.
Yeah, I would agree with you, John, because when Dexter Lawrence comes off the field, if you want that true nose tackle backup, well, DJ Davidson played the best of anybody who fits that mold. Elijah Chapman, for as many fans who really love what he did, and we know about the running back versatility, which you and I talked about on Big Blue Kickoff Live, the truth of the matter is Elijah Chapman does not fit the nose tackle frame.
No, he is 290 pounds, and he's like 5'10". So no.
Does it work?
No. But again, a lot of these players, especially ones that got released on Tuesday, those are usually the players the team's going to try to get back on the practice squad. So a lot of these guys could still be here. It's not always about just putting together the best 53. You're trying to put together, really, for the Giants, the best 70, because you have Jude McAtomney, who is your IPP player. So he's a free roster spot that gets you to 54. Then you have 16 practice squad players, many of which now can be veterans, and that'll get you to 70. So the Giants still, even the players that they let go that we've talked about, and I'll go through that full list here at some point, those guys can still be part of the organization.
Yes,
and valuable parts. Look how many guys come off the practice squad every week. You have 2 guys every week come off the practice squad and dress and play. So
we talked about this on Big Blue Kickoff all week about how the coach really has 2 lists. He's got that 53 list, and then he's got that other list, which is up to really 70 with the international exemption. And do never, ever think that just because a guy isn't on the roster tonight, that he's not going to be back in the morning having breakfast and signing a practice squad deal. Because, quite frankly, most of the guys on every team's practice squad roster were probably on the team in training camp.
Yeah, and
most of them.
And that waiver wire process will be done tomorrow, and then we'll figure out exactly who is going to be.
Practice squad guys can start getting signed.
On the practice squad, those guys will be out on the practice field for the Giants in theory once those contracts are signed.
If you want to know how to manage 2 minutes of crunch time football, I'm your man. But if you're wondering about a long-term financial plan, you should talk to Citizens. Hey, I can also talk lawn care.
I'd like to learn about a mowing routine.
Yes, I knew I could help.
Make sense of your money with Citizens.
All right, let's go to the edge, Paul. I mentioned Chauncey Golston. He was in the defensive line group. If you want to include him here, that's fine. Only 3 edge players, Paul: Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, Kayvon Thibodeau. Obviously, all gimmies here. 2 names we did not mention. That means both Trace Ford and Tamon Fox did not make that initial 53. I would not be surprised if both those guys show up on the practice squad at some point. Trace Ford, especially as an undrafted free agent, I thought was pretty active and disruptive throughout the summer in practice, and also in the preseason game.
Recovered a fumble against Buffalo.
And a lot of pressures in the backfield very consistently, so I would not be surprised if the Giants are trying to bring those guys back onto the practice squad.
Well, Ford coming out of Oklahoma, big-time program, and yes, he did show a lot of flashes. This is one of those positions, John, where at the moment the Giants have 3, the way they're listing them, where you could see where they want for the extra tight end. Okay, is that they only kept 3 edge guys.
Right. And again, Golston could also be considered in this position as well. Inside linebacker, Bobby Okereke, Micah McFadden, Darius Muasau. Again, the guys that they did not play in that final preseason game.
That's usually a hint.
It's usually a hint that they're on the roster. Those 3 guys all rested. Coach's decision in that final preseason game. And then you have Chris Board and Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, the final veteran linebacker, both special teams aces, Board and Flanagan-Fowles, as guys that made the roster.
And folks, for the billionth time during this offseason, I've been talking about how the Giants were emphasizing that they really strongly want to win special teams every weekend. The fact that they've kept 2 inside linebackers, where usually you will not have 5. You will usually have 4. Once again, they went 5 here because there are 2 guys on the back end who are special teams demon. That tells you all you need to know about how important that part of the game is going to be as they try to tilt the field.
No question about it. I'm trying to remember, Paul. Last year, it was Carter Coughlin. Who was the other Penn State linebacker that was the other consistent special teams linebacker?
Well, a couple of years ago, it was Cam Brown.
Yeah, yep. Cam Brown. It was Cam Brown and Carter Coughlin. Those are kind of the 2 inside linebackers that they've had as their special teams guys, and now Board and Flanagan-Fowles are kind of the next 2 guys in that same mold.
It's
These
a
guys
big
are more
deal.
Veteran players. Correct.
Coach Gabriel is really excited about their ability to have an edge every weekend.
No question about it. All right, let's go to the cornerback position. Giants keep 7 here, Paul. Paul Sidadibo, Deontay Banks, Cordell Flott, Drew Phillips. Those are the 4 guys that should surprise nobody. Art Green and Nick Jones, 2 young veterans that have played some time in the league. But not a ton. But those are Nick Jones, more of a slot player. Art Green, more of an outside player.
Yep.
And then 7th-round pick Corey Black is on the roster. He's missed a lot of time due to injury, but they must like of what they've seen of him. Gifted physically, big, long, ran well. They want to keep him around. Again, this is a guy that I'm not sure every game day he's going to get a jersey, but he's a young, talented player that you can try to develop at that cornerback spot.
Well, let's just talk about the three guys on the back end of the depth chart right here. Black was a very big-time special teams player in college. When we talked to Joe Shane, the general manager, right after the draft, he said, no, he's going to get a chance to compete at corner too because we think he's got skills. But yes, primarily he has been a great special teams player in college.
Yeah, and both Green and Jones also in the preseason games played a ton of special teams.
They sure did.
Punt coverage as gunners, punt and return as vice guys, and kick coverage. So all three of those guys will be competing for special team snaps.
Art Green also, when he was with us, the Giants last year, had done a pretty good job at gunner. He was not the lead guy, but he was one of the pretty good guys. So I think that's critical. Jones, I think right now, as I look at this, John, and you're going to get to the safeties in just a second, the fact that Jones does have some versatility in the defensive secondary, I think also plays into the fact that at the moment, the Giants look like they might have been a little short at safety, but Jones's ability to kind of slide in there might have helped him.
Yeah, only 3 players at safety, Tyler Nubin, Javon Holland, and Dane Belton. So could the Giants be scouring for a 4th safety somewhere, and that would mean somebody else doesn't make it? Possibly. Maybe they think one of those defensive backs, to your point, can convert to safety and be your 4th guy there.
Yeah. I don't know.
That 3's very short at safety, generally speaking.
Yes, especially if you plan on playing a lot of 3 safety packages.
I mean, you could
put yourself in a thin spot.
You could theoretically get 2 or 3 safeties on your practice squad, and then you can kind of use those guys as your 4th guy and elevate them each week if you want. That's another way to go about things. But I think they really liked the 3 safeties they kept.
Yes.
And I don't think anyone else would really challenge to bump into that top 3. But again, for depth purposes, remember, safeties also usually play a big role in special teams. At their size and speed, they're usually important special teams players. So we'll see if they end up trying to add a 4th here at some point.
Well, again, I think that's why the back 3 corners on the depth chart, the fact that they all contribute heavily on specials, I think that's what gave the Giants the impetus to go the way they're going tonight. Now, whether they change their mind in the next 48 hours and something else comes available, we don't know the answer to that right now, but I do think that's the way this factored in, at least on this particular afternoon.
Also, just a reminder, folks, we're going to be live on WFAN on Wednesday night, Paul and I, from 7 to 9, talking a little bit about the Giants' decisions on the roster, but more importantly, just previewing the season. So make sure you check us out on WFAN, 660 AM, 101.9 FM, 7 to 9 p.m. You can stream it on the Odyssey app if you're not in the New York area on Wednesday night. Make sure you go check that out. Paul, in general, I think when you look at this roster, I see it as a good mix of veterans that can help now, young guys to develop down the road, and I just think there's a greater number of good NFL players than we've seen on a Giants roster in some time.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt, John, when you look at it and you say to yourself, well, how many placeholders do you have on the back of the depth chart? Not really very many, if at all. I think at some point in time during the course of the season, I could look at every one of these guys on the 53, even the guys on the back end, and say, you know what? I could see a game or two where even a guy who might not get a jersey most of the year might wind up getting activated for a game and giving them something.
Not to mention some of the guys that will eventually be put onto the practice squad. You would have no problem and have full confidence in those guys stepping in, having to play if you need them to.
Well, especially we mentioned we mentioned a couple of the linebacker candidates, but even some of the receivers. We told you all camp the receiver group was pretty deep,
and the defensive line group as well.
Yeah.
I think there are guys there that you can have faith if you need to call them up in a pinch, that they can certainly help you. Paul, this was fun as always, my friend.
Yeah, it absolutely was. I'm glad we finally got down to the very nitty-gritty of this. The Rubik's Cube is finally starting to get solved, right?
This was the nitty-gritty, and now we start to get into big stuff as the NFL season begins in a little more than a week when the Cowboys kick off the season against the Eagles. Pardon me.
Bless you.
That's big. That's our edition of the Giants Huddle podcast presented by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. I am John Schmeelk. He is Paul Dottino. Thanks for joining us in our podcast studio presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. I'm getting better, thankfully. That sneeze might not be indications of that, but I am. Trust me. For Paul, I'm Schmeelk. We'll see you next time, everybody.